So thank you to Christine Orr for pointing out something that every librarian knows. We love persistent identifiers. We love to organize information. These are just some examples of traditional persistent identifiers. I should note that OCLC is about to hit its 1 billionth number. That's 1 billion individual records in its database, and that is a lot. We really love persistent identifiers. So these are examples of 2 books from our library at Northeastern. You can see how many persistent identifiers appear on the verso of the title page of one book, including some that we've added ourselves. And then from a different book, there's a lot more there. I don't know if you can see where they're highlighted. Even that punch card is an early example of a persistent identifier. It meant something to the computer that was able to read it, a precursor of the barcode. How do we engage with persistent identifiers? So as research supporters, we educate all the folks that we work with to do things like use the permalinks to our licensed and purchased e-resources for when they're citing and setting up course readings and so on. Sometimes it will be a DOI, sometimes it'll be something that includes our proxy server information. We also promote our institutional repository as a place where deposited items get a persistent ID. Getting folks to use that handle that is assigned in our repository is really challenging, and I am interested to hear how we can work with them to get buy-in. And as David mentioned, we also, on our side, we help track compliance with funder mandates as well. Just another example of how we support researchers with persistent identifiers. I don't know if anybody here uses Zotero. One of my colleagues says that faculty are thrilled to know that they can just put in a DOI into Zotero and it will automatically generate a citation. That's like magic to them, so excellent. Libraries are also publishers. So we create DOIs ourselves for the journal articles and other materials that we produce for folks on our campus. Again, we create the handles for objects in our institutional repositories. And we also, some of us, not me, participate in development work to integrate ORCID IDs and ORCIDs in repository and publishing platforms. So I know there's a new ORCID plugin for Hydra. And there's also an OJS plugin that's being worked on for ORCID. But there are things that we would like to do that are challenging. For example, we want to know how many Northeastern researchers have an ID assigned to them, whether that's an ORCID or a researcher ID or a Scopus ID. As a couple of people have mentioned on this panel, name disambiguation for institutions is a real thing as well. There are many different flavors of Northeastern University, not just the one in Shenyang, China. There's also, I'll just quickly go through these: Northeastern Federal University in Yakutsk, Russia, Northeastern Illinois University, Northeastern Ohio University, Northeastern State University, Northwestern University. You would be surprised, we actually get mail for Northwestern University. ILL books get returned to us instead of, they just put Boston, Massachusetts, and it comes to us. So how do we find this stuff out if it's not always easy to search by institutional affiliation? So common sense might suggest that searching the websites of the organizations that create the IDs would be the best way to go about it, but that's not always possible. So if you're not a subscriber to Thomson Reuters, Web of Science, or Scopus, you can't necessarily find out who on your campus has one of their IDs. I know from ORCID that, I know myself because I created my own ORCID, but I know that I have a Scopus ID because there's a connection there, but I have no way of accessing that information because my library doesn't subscribe to Scopus. I used Google to search for Northeastern-affiliated authors with ORCIDs, but I'm pretty sure I didn't find them all. And while it's probably possible to get this information from the vendor or the system or the developer who created it, that shouldn't be necessary. It doesn't help people who aren't affiliated with an institution, for example. And why do we want to know this information? So we want to be able to do outreach to departments who have a growing disciplinary uptake of persistent identifiers. So either their grant applications require it, their journal submissions are starting to require it, and so on. We'd like to be able to gauge interest and or need in a large-scale implementation project. So do people on our campus want the library to spearhead a project where everybody gets an ORCID, or do they already all have ORCIDs? That's something that we would like to know. And to be able to better support interdisciplinary cross-institutional collaboration. And also reduce duplication of effort in creating researcher profiles. So we don't necessarily, we want to know going into it, if I go to the College of Engineering and say we'd like to do a pilot project where we assign everybody in your department an ORCID, we don't want to be stuck, with them saying, oh, everybody here already has an ORCID, and we didn't know that. So, outreach and support is a way for us to add value to the research and publishing process. And, just to underline, how can we know the return on investment in a large-scale project if we don't know how many IDs would need to be created, how many would benefit from that, and so on. So this is kind of a graphical representation of the problem, and I apologize, it's very faint. This looks better on my screen at home. So the 4 boxes clockwise from top are author, institution, identifier system, and publisher. And connections exist between all of those parties, except there's not a good connection between the institution, the author's home institution, and the identifier systems. So, there are relationships that are automated or otherwise between the author and the ID system. The author and the institution obviously have a relationship, but we have poor access to information about the institution's authors within the identifier system. And I know there are APIs, for example, but they need to focus more, I think, on more than just minting a persistent identifier, but it should also have a reporting function for us. We want to support systems like ORCID, and we want to encourage our faculty to sign up, but we also want to be able to track our authors' update. And the bottom line is, to get back to the beginning slide, librarians don't like knowing that there's information out there that we can't access easily. So we see a problem, we want to fix it. We want to take that red X out of this equation. Thank you.